Welcome to BL Stories, where romance, drama, and unforgettable boys' love come to life. Love knows no limits, and the best stories aren't always straight. Subscribe now and join our growing BL-loving family. Chapter 34. Come on, it's just one night, Jenna pleaded, leaning closer to Sebastian as they sat on his couch watching an episode of Jersey Shore, her favorite show. You don't even have to drink. I just don't want to go there alone. You know how those creeps won't leave me alone if I do. Sebastian could tell she was aiming straight for his soft spot. The idea of Jenna being surrounded by pushy guys made his stomach twist. He groaned and dropped his head back against the couch. Why do you enjoy torturing me so much? He asked, rubbing his hands over his face. Because we're friends, Jenna replied simply, smiling up at him. And your reactions are way too entertaining. Sebastian let out a small chuckle and lowered his hands to his lap, looking down at her hopeful expression. All right, fine. I'll go, he finally said, still uneasy at the thought of another party. He hadn't been to a high school New Year's Eve party, or any party at all, in nearly a year. The last one had ended badly, leaving him shaken enough to avoid crowded gatherings ever since. Yes. Jenna cheered, jumping up from the couch before plopping back down beside him. But I might not be able to drive you home afterward, Sebastian added once she settled enough for him to speak without laughing at her excitement. That's okay, Jenna said easily. I'll just grab a cab whenever I feel like leaving. She leaned back and turned her attention to the TV again. Honestly, I think it'll be good for you to get out. Meet new people. Who knows, you might even meet someone you really connect with. Sebastian wasn't thrilled about the idea of being around a lot of people, especially after everything that had happened over the past year. Still, a small part of him wondered if this time might be different. He'd be with someone he trusted, and he wasn't planning on drinking. I guess so, he said after a moment, glancing over at her. It's this weekend, right? What time do you want me to pick you up? I don't want to get there too early, Jenna mused, pulling her legs up and crossing them beneath her. How about 10 p.m.? Actually, 9 p.m. Then I can help you get all dressed up. Sebastian hesitated. I'm not really sure about that. Getting dressed up felt almost as uncomfortable as being surrounded by unfamiliar, overly excited people. I promise I won't go overboard, Jenna said, leaning forward with her hands on her knees and flashing him a wide grin. It's just a high school New Year's party, after all. I'll even get dropped off here so you don't have to drive back and forth. Sebastian sighed, choosing not to argue. He knew Jenna well enough to know that saying no wouldn't stop her, she'd probably just show up anyway. Still, he wasn't about to let her completely take over his evening. He leaned back against the couch, resigned but quietly hoping that maybe, just maybe, this night wouldn't turn out like the last one. Chapter 35. Danny could finally walk without a noticeable limp, and a few days ago the doctors had replaced his arm cast with a brace. Physically, he was healing well. Mentally, though, it was a different story. Every time his thoughts drifted back to the moment Sebastian had carried him to and from the hospital, his face warmed with embarrassment. Sebastian had taken up far too much space in his mind lately, so much so that Danny found it hard to focus on anything else. The constant daydreaming made it difficult to think clearly, and he knew he needed some time alone to sort himself out. After dropping Philip off at a friend's house for a playdate, Danny decided to go for a walk. The cold air ruffled his hair and slipped through his jacket, sending a chill through his body. At first, he walked without direction, letting his thoughts lead the way. When he finally looked around, he realized he had wandered near the high school. Unsure where to go next, he kept walking until he spotted the park where he used to take Philip during the warmer months. Danny made his way to the swing set and sat down on one of the cold plastic seats. He began to gently sway back and forth, trying to organize his racing thoughts. He knew his feelings for Sebastian went far beyond a simple crush, and that realization scared him. He had been hurt before, and the idea of going through that again made his chest tighten. Part of him wanted to keep his feelings hidden forever. Another part was growing tired of pretending they didn't exist. He pushed off the ground harder, swinging faster as his thoughts spiraled. What if Sebastian feels the same way? The question made him stop abruptly. Danny sat still, staring ahead. He didn't even know how a relationship between two guys would work. Dates, closeness, emotions, it all felt unfamiliar. His only experience had been with girls, and that didn't exactly make him feel prepared. He knew things would be different, but he didn't know how different, or if he was ready for it. And what did he really know about Sebastian, anyway? Sure, Sebastian was kind. He was thoughtful, patient, and great with Philip. Just thinking about him made Danny's stomach twist in a way that was both exciting and terrifying. Still, there was so much Danny didn't understand, about Sebastian and about himself. There were parts of his life he had never shared with anyone, not even Philip. Letting someone in meant facing things he had worked hard to keep buried. Sebastian seemed to have his own struggles, too. Danny wondered if he was strong enough to support someone else while still holding himself together. His first instinct was yes. But deep down, he knew it wouldn't be easy. Frustrated, Danny pushed off again, swinging higher. The urge to reach for a cigarette tugged at him, but he stopped himself. The thought of Sebastian being disappointed, even without knowing why, was enough to keep his hand out of his pocket. Somehow, that alone made quitting feel more possible. "You know," a familiar voice said from his left, "I never thought I'd see you here again." Danny glanced over to see Jenna sitting on the swing beside him, a hesitant smile on her face. They hadn't really spoken in nearly 3 years, yet this was the second time they had crossed paths in just a couple of months. Unsure of her intentions, Danny kept swinging and said nothing. "I know you're still upset with me," Jenna continued, unfazed by his silence. "But I really want to make things right." She paused, then added, "And I know you like guys. More specifically, I know you like Sebastian." Danny's foot slipped as he pushed off, and he nearly tumbled from the swing. His heart raced as panic set in. Had he really been that obvious? How many other people knew? "Relax," Jenna said calmly as she started swinging too. "You're not obvious. I've just been paying attention." "What makes you think I feel anything for that guy?" Danny snapped, hoping anger would shut the conversation down. Jenna laughed lightly, swinging higher. "Because you're scared. And because you care," she replied. "Some things about you haven't changed, Danny." "Oh yeah," he challenged. "Like what?" She thought for a moment, then smiled. "You still fall hard when it comes to someone you like." Danny felt his face heat up. "That's not. You only come here when something really matters to you," Jenna said gently. "And right now, that something is him." She slowed her swing. "Which is why I came over in the first place." Danny narrowed his eyes as he began swinging again. "Why?" "When I said I wanted to make amends, I meant it," Jenna replied. "So at the New Year's Eve party this weekend, I've planned a little surprise for you." Danny didn't respond right away, his suspicion clear. Jenna continued, "It might take some convincing, but I promise, it's something you'll like." "I was already planning on going," Danny said cautiously. "So we'll see." Jenna nodded, gazing off as they swung side by side. One question still lingered in Danny's mind. "What happened to your boyfriend?" he asked. "I broke up with him," Jenna answered without hesitation. "Turns out I prefer girls." Danny didn't react. He simply stared ahead for a moment before stopping the swing and standing up. "I guess I'll see you at the party then," he said over his shoulder as he walked away, leaving Jenna alone at the swing set while he headed off to pick up Philip. Chapter 36. Sebastian groaned when he heard a sharp knock at the front door. He muted the television, pushed himself off the couch, and headed toward the entrance. Even before opening it, he knew exactly who was on the other side. The moment the door swung open, Jenna shoved a large plastic bag into his hands, grinning widely as she stepped past him and into the house. "This is for you," she announced cheerfully. Sebastian blinked, instinctively taking the bag as he stepped aside to let her through. Confused, he closed the door and turned to face her. "What exactly is this?" he asked, lifting the bag slightly in her direction. "It's my apology gift," Jenna said easily. "For dragging you to the party tonight. I know you don't really like going out anymore, especially after what happened before." She shrugged, keeping her tone light. "And it might help keep annoying people away." "You didn't have to do that," Sebastian replied, lowering the bag to his side. I know, Jenna said with a laugh. But I wanted to. Now go try it on. She bounced excitedly on her heels, clearly eager. Sebastian raised an eyebrow at the bag but sighed. Alright, I guess. Jenna immediately ushered him toward the nearest bathroom and waited outside the door, humming impatiently. Sebastian exhaled slowly and opened the bag. To his surprise, the clothes inside were simple but stylish, dark jeans and 2 different shirts. He laid everything out on the counter and examined them more closely. The tags showed a brand he didn't recognize, which likely meant they weren't cheap. His family had money, but his parents never saw the point in spending it on everyday clothes. He changed into the jeans first, only realizing at the last second that they had small rips at the knees. Carefully pulling them on, he was surprised to find they fit well, even if they were a little loose at the waist. Next, he picked up a plain black V-neck shirt. It looked slightly small, but he tried it anyway. The fabric stretched comfortably, fitting closer than he was used to, but not uncomfortably so. The second shirt was a dark blue and green plaid button-up. It fit more loosely, which Sebastian appreciated. He layered it over the black shirt and finally glanced at his reflection. For a moment, he barely recognized himself. The change was subtle, but it still made him uneasy. Are you done yet? Jenna called through the door. I want to see. Yeah, I'm done, Sebastian replied, forgetting that he hadn't locked the door. Jenna burst in and immediately stopped short, staring at him. Wow, she said. You look really good. Sebastian's face flushed as he looked away. Compliments had never been easy for him, and Jenna's blunt honesty didn't help. If I weren't a lesbian, I'd be seriously impressed, she added with a grin. Sebastian frowned slightly, his embarrassment deepening. He thought he'd gotten used to Jenna's bold comments, but maybe not as much as he'd believed. Hey, Jenna said, her tone softening. Are you okay? Yeah, Sebastian replied quietly. Just remembering things. Jenna nodded, understanding more than she let on. She smiled gently. These clothes are part of another apology, actually, she said. I'm hoping tonight turns out to be a good surprise for you. Assuming a certain someone hasn't already done something stupid. A certain someone? Sebastian asked, narrowing his eyes. Jenna just laughed. We'll see. And you might even thank me later, assuming he behaves. She paused, then straightened. Now, there's just one last thing. Sebastian tensed slightly. Which is? Your hair, Jenna said, already stepping closer. And maybe a little cologne, if you're okay with that. Just hold still. Sebastian hesitated, then nodded, hoping, just this once, that maybe things would go differently. Chapter 37. Sebastian parked his car about a block away from the party house, hoping it wouldn't attract the attention of anyone who had been drinking. Jenna bounced excitedly in the passenger seat beside him. She wore black faux leather leggings, knee-high heeled boots, and a cropped top under a black and red jacket. Her dark hair was straightened, and her makeup was a little bolder than usual. It'll be okay, Jenna said gently when she noticed the familiar look in Sebastian's eyes, the one that meant he was thinking about leaving before they even went inside. You look great. She stepped out of the car and waited for him near the hood. Sebastian adjusted the rearview mirror for one last look at himself. Jenna had styled his hair earlier, giving it a slightly messy look on top while keeping the sides neat. She'd mentioned it was good practice for her dream of becoming a professional hairdresser, and he'd reluctantly agreed. To his surprise, he actually liked how it turned out. It felt different, new, but still like something his parents wouldn't disapprove of. He closed his eyes and took a slow, steady breath. You can do this, he told himself. Before he could lose his nerve, he stepped out of the car, locked it, and joined Jenna. She smiled reassuringly and led the way toward the house. As they got closer, the noise grew louder, music thumping, voices overlapping. Sebastian's heartbeat quickened, and his shoulders tensed. Jenna noticed and gently held out her hand, waiting. After a brief pause, Sebastian took it. Her grip was light but steady, and he followed her toward the brightly lit house. They slipped past a small group gathered near the front and went inside. The smell of alcohol made Sebastian uneasy, but Jenna guided him farther in until they reached the dining room, where drinks were set out. Jenna quickly poured herself a drink while Sebastian searched for something non-alcoholic. He found an unopened can of soda under the table and took a cautious sip. When he looked back, Jenna was already starting to laugh more easily. "Come on, dance with me," she called over the music, holding out her hand. Sebastian hesitated, then took it. Holding on to his soda, he followed her into the backyard, where more people were gathered. A small DJ setup flashed colorful lights across the lawn. Jenna jumped into the middle of the group and moved to the beat. Sebastian stayed close, swaying awkwardly at first. Slowly, he loosened up a bit, and Jenna noticed, smiling proudly. Feeling confident he'd be okay for a moment, she leaned close and told him she was going to grab another drink. Sebastian nodded, though he felt uneasy watching her disappear back into the house. At first, he managed. But as the crowd shifted and people brushed past him, his chest tightened. His thoughts spiraled and the noise felt overwhelming. He pushed his way out of the crowd and found a quiet spot near the side of the house, taking small sips of his soda until the dizziness faded. Once he felt steadier, he decided it was time to find Jenna and leave. Inside, he scanned the room but didn't see her near the drinks. His worry grew until he spotted her across the room, laughing and sharing a close moment with another girl she'd mentioned before. Relieved, Sebastian quietly turned away, giving them space. At least she was having fun. He grabbed another soda and wandered the house, trying to remind himself why he'd come. Maybe this was his chance to face his fears. But after a while, the effort became too much. He decided to leave. As he made his way through the room, careful to avoid contact, he spotted an empty chair. Just as he stepped toward it, someone grabbed his arm. He turned to see a girl who was clearly unsteady. She smiled and leaned too close. Sebastian quickly but calmly stepped back, gently removing her hands. Without a word, he walked away and sat down in the chair, his hands trembling slightly as he drank his soda. Looking around, he noticed how different he felt compared to everyone else. The experience he'd been through had changed him more than he'd realized. That thought left a quiet ache in his chest. He was lost in thought when someone stopped in front of him. Sebastian looked up to see Danny, clearly upset, clearly having had too much to drink, staring down at him. The sharp smell of alcohol made Sebastian tense, but seeing Danny's troubled expression pulled him back to the present. "I figured," Danny said thickly, pointing at him with an unsteady hand, "that she was talking about you." Chapter 38. Sebastian noticed Danny swaying slightly as he tried to navigate through the crowd. "Hey, are you all right?" he asked, setting his drink down and gently holding Danny by the shoulders to steady him. Danny's head hung low. "No, of course I'm not all right. Ever since I met you, everything's gotten so confusing," he muttered, his voice soft and hesitant. "What do you mean?" Sebastian asked, giving his shoulders a reassuring shake. Danny's eyes stayed on the floor. Sebastian sighed and perched on the arm of his chair. "Do you want me to take you home?" Danny shook his head slowly, a pout forming on his lips. "Can I come to your place?" Danny mumbled, finally looking up. Sebastian noticed the blush on his cheeks and mistook it for the effects of alcohol rather than embarrassment. "What about Philip?" Sebastian asked, standing carefully in front of him. "He's at a sleepover tonight," Danny said, slurring slightly but managing to speak clearly enough. "All right," Sebastian replied. "You can come with me, but we'll need to be quiet. My parents will be asleep." He placed a reassuring hand on Danny's back and guided him out of the house. Outside, they made their way to the car. Sebastian helped Danny inside and fastened his seatbelt. The ride was quiet at first, both of them lost in thought. Finally, Danny spoke. "Do you know why you annoy me so much?" Sebastian snorted. "Oh, bite. Why do I annoy you?" "Because you made me quit smoking," Danny replied, trying to glare but failing, his eyes drooping with fatigue. "I haven't had one in nearly 2 weeks." Sebastian raised an eyebrow. "Wait, how did I make you quit? You still smell like smoke." "My friends were smoking at the party," Danny admitted. "Can I shower at your place to get rid of the smell?" "You can," Sebastian said with a small smile, "but you still haven't answered why it mattered that I didn't like it." Danny hesitated, then muttered softly, "Because I like you." Sebastian blinked, stunned. He didn't respond, just let Danny drift into silence as they arrived at his house. Danny jerked awake when the car stopped. "Are we here?" he asked. "Yeah," Sebastian replied, helping him out and leading him quietly upstairs to his room. He guided Danny to the bathroom. "Call if you need anything," he said softly. Danny nodded and went to shower, leaving Sebastian alone with his thoughts. He quickly changed into pajamas, trying to process what Danny had just confessed. Footsteps approached. Sebastian grabbed a shirt and put it on as Danny emerged, towel around his shoulders. Danny looked at him, conflicted. "I don't know," he murmured. He hesitated, then reached out to touch Sebastian's cheek gently. Sebastian's heart skipped a beat. "I know you don't like too much contact," Danny whispered, "but can we just sit close for a bit?" Sebastian nodded slowly. Danny smiled faintly and sat next to him on the bed, their shoulders brushing. They leaned slightly toward each other, hearts pounding, sharing a moment of quiet intimacy. Sebastian felt the warmth of Danny's hand against his own, the vulnerability in his expression, and he realized how much he wanted to protect him. For a long moment, they simply sat there, talking in whispers, sharing small touches, and letting the closeness speak for itself. When Danny's eyes began to droop, Sebastian gently wrapped a blanket around them both, careful to give Danny space, and watched him settle into sleep. As he lay beside him, Sebastian let himself feel the weight of everything: confusion, attraction, fear, and hope, all tangled together. He knew there was a lot they had to figure out, but for now he simply stayed close, letting the quiet comfort of the moment speak louder than words. Chapter 39. The pounding in Danny's head was the first thing he noticed when he woke up. Opening his eyes felt almost impossible, the brightness stabbing at his throbbing temples. He groaned and rolled over on the soft, surprisingly comfortable surface he was lying on. For a moment he was confused. How could a floor feel this warm and cozy? It slowly came back to him. He must have passed out at the party. His memory of the night was hazy at best, a blur of lights, loud music, and the last thing he remembered seeing, Sebastian in the middle of the mosh pit with Jenna. Danny rubbed his temples, groaning again. He still didn't understand how this crush on Sebastian had gotten so complicated. A shift beside him caught his attention. A warm arm slid around his waist, and for a brief moment, all his tension and frustration melted away. Then reality hit. That wasn't a woman's arm, he wasn't on a soft carpet, and he wasn't fully clothed. Panic bubbled up in his chest, but he forced himself to take a deep breath and steady his thoughts. Slowly, Danny turned his head. Relief and surprise washed over him when he realized who he was lying next to: Sebastian. His heart pounded, a mix of nervousness and awe, as he took in the sight of Sebastian still fast asleep beside him. This was the first time Danny had been able to see Sebastian up close like this, really see him. He noticed the faint scars scattered across his face, barely visible from a distance but pronounced up close. Hesitantly, Danny reached out to touch a few of the marks near Sebastian's left eye, feeling a strange tenderness in doing so. His fingers ran over Sebastian's buzzed hair, and he couldn't help but let out a quiet, amused giggle at the soft texture. But then his gaze fell on a small patch where Sebastian's hair was missing, and his breath caught in his throat. How had he never noticed this before? Danny's mind began racing. How much did he really know about Sebastian? Carefully, he pulled back the covers slightly and glanced at Sebastian's chest and arms. He saw faint scars and marks that hinted at struggles he hadn't known about. His heart ached as he realized that these were reminders of past pain and battles, things Sebastian had survived but never fully shared with anyone. Seeing this, Danny understood a little more about why Sebastian was cautious with people, why he kept his distance, why he avoided being touched, and why he dressed conservatively. It all began to click into place, and a wave of compassion and sorrow washed over Danny. He blinked back the sting of tears, overwhelmed by the weight of Sebastian's unspoken history. Despite the confusion and his own racing feelings, Danny felt honored. Sebastian had trusted him enough to be close, to let him into his space, to share a quiet moment without words. Danny's heart ached with conflicting emotions: admiration, attraction, concern, and a deepening care for the boy lying next to him. He didn't know what the future held, or what exactly this meant for them, but for now he was content just to be there, beside Sebastian, feeling the fragile intimacy of trust and closeness. Chapter 40. Sebastian barely registered the gentle warmth pressed against him. The presence next to him was oddly comforting, calming in a way he hadn't expected. Slowly, he shifted his arm across, pulling the warmth closer, resting his chin lightly on the soft top of whatever, or whoever, it was. It didn't fully click until he felt a pair of arms loop around his waist in return. His eyes shot open, and his heart skipped a beat as he quickly glanced around the room. Relief washed over him when he realized he was still in his own bedroom, but the arms remained wrapped around his waist. Sebastian slowly leaned back to see who it was. Danny, having fallen asleep against him, rested with his head on Sebastian's shoulder, nose tucked near the crook of his neck. One arm wrapped gently around Sebastian's waist, the other resting across his chest. Sebastian felt panic rise, but he managed to keep it at bay, just barely. He guessed that Danny was probably sober by now, and the thought made him uneasy. What would Danny think when he fully woke up? Would he be confused, upset, or scared by the closeness? Sebastian bit his lip, trying to anticipate the questions and the emotions that might follow. His thoughts froze when Danny stirred, stretching and yawning, blinking the sleep from his eyes before finally looking up at Sebastian. "I'm sorry for whatever I did last night," Danny murmured, keeping his gaze on a freckle near a star-shaped scar on Sebastian's chest. "I don't really remember much after seeing you at the party with Jenna." Sebastian shifted back just enough to put a little space between them, careful not to give Danny the wrong impression but needing some room to calm himself. Now that Danny was awake, Sebastian's panic began to creep back in. Last night had felt different. For once, he had felt somewhat in control, but he quickly pushed the thought aside, focusing on steadying himself. Danny noticed the sudden change in Sebastian's demeanor and furrowed his brow with concern. Had he done something wrong? He didn't remember much, but he sensed that something significant had happened, and the uncertainty gnawed at him. Sebastian flipped onto his back, staring at the ceiling, one arm draped across his forehead as a headache began to build. Silence stretched heavily between them as he pondered his next steps. He felt conflicted. One option was to ask Danny to stay. He truly wanted him nearby, but he worried about the complications that could come with having him around all the time. Another option was to send Danny back to his home, but the thought twisted Sebastian's stomach and made his chest tight. That wasn't something he could bear. His conflicting thoughts only worsened his headache. He rubbed his eyes, pressing his palms against them to relieve some of the pressure. He realized he couldn't make the decision for Danny. He would have to let Danny choose for himself. Either way, he knew mistakes could have serious consequences, potentially unraveling everything he had worked so hard to keep private. "I can drive you back to your place when you're ready to leave," Sebastian finally said, letting both arms drop across his eyes. He regretted even saying it, aware of how heavy the weight of his thoughts, and his fears, had become. Chapter 41. Danny stared at the side of Sebastian's face, feeling a tight knot in his chest. He hadn't expected Sebastian to ask him to leave. He understood why, but hearing it out loud still hurt. Danny kept thinking he must have really messed up last night for Sebastian to say that without even looking at him. He didn't want to go back to his parents' house, to the tension, the arguments, and the chaos, but he also couldn't leave his younger brother to handle things alone. Protecting Philip had always been Danny's priority, and he didn't know what he would do if something happened to him. After last night, Danny wasn't sure how to ask Sebastian if he could take him up on his offer to stay with him. He had never been in a situation like this before, and he wasn't even sure how to act around Sebastian after everything that had happened. Sebastian lifted his arms from his eyes and glanced at Danny after sitting in silence for what felt like an eternity. He wondered why Danny hadn't said anything. Danny sat up, hands clenched around the blankets, staring at the sheets with a tense, almost defeated expression. "Is something wrong?" Sebastian asked, turning to face Danny fully. His eyes searched for any sign of what was troubling him. Danny took a shaky breath. "I don't really want to go back, "But I can't leave my brother alone," he whispered. Anxiety lined his face, deepening the creases in his forehead. "I'm not sure what I should do." Sebastian studied Danny's expression carefully, sensing the weight of his conflict. After a moment he spoke softly. "Hey, do you want me to explain what really happened last night? Maybe that would help." Danny glanced up briefly, eyes wide, then nodded. "Please," he said quietly. I want to understand where we stand, what I can do, what I should do." Sebastian nodded and sat up properly, crossing one knee and wrapping his arms around it. "Okay, I'll tell you. But listen all the way to the end before you respond, all right?" Danny nodded again, still fidgeting with the blanket in his hands. Sebastian carefully explained the events of the night. He told Danny how he had found him at the party, offered for him to stay at his place to sober up, and suggested a shower to help him relax and think more clearly. Sebastian described how they had ended up sitting together in his room, talking and sharing a quiet moment, but reassured Danny that nothing had happened that either of them would regret. He had been careful because Danny was still inebriated, and he wanted to make sure he was comfortable. When Sebastian finished, Danny remained quiet for a long moment, face flushed with a mix of relief and embarrassment. Then he leaned forward slightly, hiding his face in the blankets, trying to hide his emotions. Sebastian hesitated, then gently reached out to place a hand on Danny's head, softly stroking his hair. Danny relaxed a little under the comforting gesture, letting out a small, relieved sigh. Did you really try to quit smoking for me?" Sebastian asked softly, voice gentle. Danny tensed for a moment before relaxing again. "Yeah," he admitted quietly, his voice muffled. "I know you don't like it." Sebastian smiled faintly. "You were the first person I felt close to in a long time, the first person I wanted to trust, to be near." Danny looked up, curiosity and concern mixing in his eyes. "Why is that?" Sebastian's gaze dropped to the floor. "I'd rather not talk about it," he said quietly, struggling to keep his emotions in check. Danny could see the weight behind those words and understood that there were things Sebastian hadn't shared yet, things he wasn't ready to talk about. After a pause, Sebastian's voice softened. "If you want to stay here, I can even pick up your brother from his friend's house. He can stay too." He pulled out his phone and sent a quick text to his parents, letting them know that Danny and Philip would be staying over. He wanted to make the decision before Danny could overthink it. "Wouldn't that cause problems for you, for your parents?" Danny asked, picking at the blanket, uncertain but hopeful. "My parents have been trying to figure out a way to help you and Philip ever since that dinner a few months ago," Sebastian said with a small, reassuring smile. "It won't be a problem at all." Danny felt a small spark of hope and allowed himself a tentative smile. Things might actually get better, for him and for Philip. Still, a tiny voice in the back of his mind whispered that it all felt almost too easy. Chapter 42. Danny sat quietly in the passenger seat of Sebastian's car as they drove to pick up Philip from his friend's house, where he had stayed the night before. Danny didn't like leaving Philip at home alone, so he did whatever he could to make sure his brother was safe and occupied whenever he needed some time to himself. Sebastian drove calmly, letting Danny sit in silence as he watched the scenery pass by. When they arrived, Danny got out and walked up to the door while Sebastian stayed in the car, waiting patiently. Danny rapped on the door with his knuckles and stepped back, anticipating the door swinging open. Mrs. Packer, Philip's friend's mother, opened the door slowly and smiled at Danny. He returned the smile, hearing Philip's laughter and chatter from inside. It tugged at him, knowing how much fun his brother was having, but this time he wasn't taking Philip home to their parents. They were heading somewhere safer. "Hello, Mrs. Packer. I'm here to pick up Philip," Danny said, trying not to fidget too much. Talking to adults always made him nervous, and Sebastian had always been better at it. "Hello, Daniel," Mrs. Packer replied warmly. "He's just finishing up a game. Would you like to come inside and wait? Your friend can come too if he'd like." "Just tell Philip the first brought a friend with me," Danny said with a small smile, thinking about how surprised and excited his brother would be. "I'll wait here for him." "All right," Mrs. Packer said, looking slightly puzzled, then turned to head back inside. Danny caught a few muffled words before Philip's voice rang out loudly and excitedly. "Really?" Danny heard running footsteps on the hardwood floor, followed by a familiar laugh. He knelt down just in time as Philip practically leapt into his arms for a big hug, while his friends stopped a few steps behind, watching. Philip's eyes sparkled with excitement as he looked up at Danny. "Is he really here?" Philip asked, bouncing with energy. "Yes," Danny replied, waving toward the car. He gestured for Sebastian to step out. Philip's excitement only grew, and when Sebastian emerged, Philip ran straight into his arms. "Sebi!" Philip cried, hugging Sebastian around the neck. Sebastian flinched slightly at first but quickly returned the hug with a gentle smile. Danny noticed the difference, the ease Sebastian had with Philip compared to him, and wondered why it felt so different. "What are you doing here, Sebi?" Philip asked, settling comfortably in Sebastian's arms. "Well," Sebastian began, meeting Philip's eyes, "I thought maybe you and your brother would like to have a permanent sleepover at my house." Danny felt warmth swell in his chest watching Sebastian interact with Philip. "Your brother won't answer until he knows what you think, so we came to ask you first." "Do you really mean it?" Philip asked, his smile fading as tears began to form. He looked at Danny. "We can really stay with Sebastian and not have to go back to Mom and Dad?" "If you want to, we can," Danny said gently, stepping closer to join them. Philip's friend followed hesitantly, tilting his head in curiosity. "Yay!" Philip exclaimed, hugging Sebastian tightly around the neck. Sebastian stiffened for a moment but quickly returned the hug, smiling as Philip giggled in his arms. "But we do need to pick up a few things first, buddy," Danny reminded, keeping his tone gentle so as not to dampen the mood. Philip's smile wavered, replaced by a nervous frown. "You don't think they'll be there, do you?" Philip asked, wringing his hands anxiously. "I'm sure everything will be okay," Danny reassured him. "But first, why don't you introduce us to your friend?" He smiled and gestured toward the little boy still standing behind him. "Okay," Philip said, regaining some of his excitement. Sebastian set him down gently, and the two boys walked together toward the doorway, ready to face the next step of their adventure. Chapter 43. As Sebastian pulled up to the house, Danny felt his chest tighten. Philip kept his head down, quiet and tense, as they eased into the driveway. Danny's relief grew when he realized their parents' car wasn't there. Sebastian turned off the engine and stepped out first, shaking Danny and Philip gently out of their dazed state. Danny followed, helping Philip out of the back seat, and together they joined Sebastian at the front of the car. Danny led the way to the front door, with Sebastian sticking close behind like a shadow, and Philip clutching at the back of Sebastian's leg. Danny retrieved the key from the planter by the door and unlocked the house. The door creaked open to a quiet, empty house. The only sounds were the boys' footsteps and breathing as they entered. Danny relaxed slightly, realizing his parents weren't home. He walked calmly into the house, leaving his shoes on, figuring he wouldn't be there long. "Go grab anything you want to take with you," Danny said over his shoulder to Philip. "Is it safe?" Philip asked, peeking from behind Sebastian's leg. "Yeah, they aren't home right now," Danny replied nervously, glancing around the house. "But be quick, I don't want to be here when they get back." Philip nodded and ran toward his bedroom to gather his things. Danny followed the same staircase, with Sebastian almost uncomfortably close behind. Danny's cheeks flushed slightly at the protective presence hovering near him. He unlocked his bedroom door with a key he had kept in his pants pocket. Inside, Danny's room was sparse, with little personal decoration. A twin mattress rested beneath the window, a small desk lamp sat beside it on a stack of books, and a worn desk with chipped paint leaned against the wall near the closet. Danny gathered a few books, placed them in his backpack, and grabbed some clothes from the closet. When he looked up, Sebastian was still in the doorway, giving him space to sort through his things. Danny appreciated the quiet support. He opened the top drawer of his desk one last time and retrieved a framed photo of himself and his elder brother on the back deck, with Philip in his brother's arms. He carefully placed the photo in his backpack and zipped it shut. Sebastian waited patiently in the hall as Danny took one final glance around the room, then exhaled and left without locking the door. Danny offered a small, half-smile at Sebastian, and they moved down the hall toward Philip's room. Sebastian noticed another door with frayed yellow tape around the edges. Danny deliberately avoided looking at it. Sebastian made a mental note to ask him about it later. Philip emerged with his small backpack on, looking a little tearful but brightening at the sight of Danny and Sebastian. He ran to them, and Danny hugged him tightly. "This is it," Danny whispered, kissing the top of Philip's head. "We're finally free." Tears slipped down both of their faces as relief and lingering fear mixed together. Sebastian followed silently behind, knowing this was a moment for the brothers. Danny paused at the front door for one last look inside. He closed his eyes, letting himself remember the few good memories the house had given him, before shutting the door behind him. He locked it, exhaled, and turned to Sebastian's car. They had left the past behind, and Danny felt the first real sense of hope in a long time as he climbed into the passenger seat, Philip hopping in beside him. Chapter 44. As Sebastian pulled into the driveway, Danny felt like he was seeing the house for the first time. The last time he had seen it, he had been drunk and barely able to remember anything from the night. Now, sober and alert, Danny felt a tight knot of apprehension in his stomach. He couldn't help but worry about what Sebastian's parents would think if they knew what had happened the night before. He wasn't about to tell Philip, though, no way. Philip, on the other hand, was bouncing excitedly in his seat, barely able to contain his energy as Sebastian parked behind one of his parents' cars. He unbuckled himself quickly, almost falling out of the car as he ran toward the front door, backpack half on his shoulders. Danny stayed put in the passenger seat, staring up at Sebastian's massive house, trying to calm his nerves. He swallowed hard. It wasn't that he regretted leaving his old home, but staying here, at Sebastian's house, with Sebastian, was intimidating. Things were going to be different, and more than a little awkward. Danny wasn't sure how to act, especially in a place that felt so unlike his own home. Even though he had met Sebastian's parents once and found them nice, Danny knew they could be very different in their own space. Sebastian had noticed Danny's hesitation and stiff posture when they reached the gate. He had tried to comfort him earlier, but confidence had slipped away, leaving Sebastian unsure of how to reach Danny now. Still, he knew he had to try. Gently, Sebastian released a hand from the steering wheel and reached toward Danny, brushing his knuckles softly against Danny's cheek. Danny bit his lip nervously and froze at the touch. He lowered his chin, no longer craning his neck at the house, and slowly relaxed. Sebastian held his gaze, a small reassurance in his eyes. "What?" Danny asked quietly, uncomfortable under Sebastian's concerned stare. "It'll be okay," Sebastian replied with a reassuring smile before stepping out of the car. He moved to the front with Philip hopping excitedly beside him. Danny took a deep breath, following them to the front door, tapping his foot nervously as Sebastian opened the door and led the way inside. The hallway felt strange to Danny, unfamiliar and tense. Sebastian left space for him and Philip to follow, his presence quietly comforting. The door clicked shut behind them, and Danny's throat went dry at the finality of it. No turning back now. Philip immediately removed his shoes and placed them neatly on the rack, and Danny followed suit, keeping his eyes on Sebastian's back for reassurance. At the end of the hall, Sebastian paused, then continued forward. Philip stayed close, holding onto Danny's side. Sebastian glanced back, giving Danny a shy, encouraging smile as they entered the living room. Danny noticed two older adults sitting on the couch, familiar yet different in casual clothing. Of course, they were Sebastian's parents. The contrast from the formal attire at dinner was stark, and they appeared more relaxed now. "Sorry, I didn't think they'd be home so early," Sebastian whispered to Danny. "I wanted you guys to get used to the place first, but it seems they had other plans." As Sebastian led them forward, his parents stood, smiling warmly but keeping their distance. Danny felt slightly odd at the lack of physical greeting, remembering how Sebastian's father had offered his hand warmly the last time. Philip shyly gripped the back of Danny's pants after shaking hands with Sebastian's father. "It's very nice to see you both again," Sebastian's mother said pleasantly, turning her attention to Danny and Philip. "Mom, Dad, you promised we'd have some time to settle in first," Sebastian teased gently, rubbing the back of his head. His father smiled, and his mother laughed, giving Sebastian a light nudge with her shoulder, playful but gentle. We just wanted to say hello and go over some house rules, she replied, smiling at Danny and Philip. Don't worry, there aren't too many. Please, have a seat on the couch. Sebastian led Danny and Philip into the living room, with the boys trailing close behind, still a little nervous. Sebastian sat at one end of the couch, leaving space for Danny and Philip. Philip climbed onto the couch closest to Sebastian, and Danny sat between them, nearest the end of the couch where Sebastian's parents remained seated. The air was filled with cautious curiosity, but also a quiet warmth. Danny couldn't help but notice how naturally Sebastian handled the situation, and for the first time since arriving, he allowed himself to feel just a little at ease. Chapter 45. You don't really have to do this, Danny said quietly, watching as Sebastian finished setting up the bed in the guest room they would be sharing. For now, this would be Philip's temporary setup until they arranged a bed for him in the empty storage room down the hall. Sebastian glanced up from the bed, noticing Danny standing in the doorway in one of his oversized t-shirts and his father's track pants. His parents hadn't expected Danny and Philip to arrive so soon, so nothing in the house had been fully prepared for them. It's fine really. I don't mind, Sebastian replied, keeping his eyes on the sheets so Danny wouldn't notice how much he had been staring at him. Danny stepped into the room, fidgeting slightly with his fingers as he hovered near the edge of the bed. Do you want to help? Sebastian asked, lifting his gaze just long enough to meet Danny's. Yeah, what can I do? Danny asked, shifting nervously from foot to foot. Being in Sebastian's house made him uneasy, and he wasn't quite sure how to act. Could you grab the sheets from the dresser and help me put them on the bed? Sebastian asked, pointing to the folded sheets by the door. Danny walked over, picked up the sheets, and returned to the bed. Together, they unfolded the sheet, smoothed it out, and tucked in the corners. Sebastian grabbed the comforter from the floor and laid it over the bed in a messy pile. Danny helped straighten it, folding back a corner to reveal the pillows. There we go. That should do it for now, Sebastian said, smoothing the comforter with a satisfied nod. You don't mind sharing the room with your brother for a bit, do you? No, it's fine, Danny replied, sitting cross-legged on the bed and nervously playing with the hem of his pants. We used to share rooms a lot when Philip was younger. Are you okay? Sebastian asked gently, perching on the opposite side of the bed. Danny nodded slowly, still focused on the hem of his pants. It wasn't like him to feel so unsure, but the past 36 hours had been overwhelming, leaving an abusive home, navigating his feelings for Sebastian, and now living with him and knowing his younger brother was safe. I know it's a lot to take in, Sebastian said softly. We can talk a bit if you want. Might help you feel a little better. He lay down on his back, parallel to Danny, feet hanging off the bed. Sure, but what would we even talk about? Danny asked, curious yet hesitant. First, I want to apologize, Sebastian said, hesitating slightly. About what my parents did earlier, taking pictures of your scars and bruises. I know it was uncomfortable. Danny looked over at him, noticing the nervous way Sebastian bit his lip. It's okay. They explained why they needed to. Even if it felt weird, I understand. Danny shifted slightly. Do you really think Philip and I could get emancipated from our parents? My parents know some of the best child advocates and attorneys, Sebastian replied with a shrug. It shouldn't be too difficult. We'll just need to get you a few more clothes soon. Mom and Philip went shopping earlier for that. Danny had barely thought about what he'd need beyond escaping his old home. But one thing still weighed on him, the guilt and awkwardness from last night. Now that they would be living together temporarily, it felt important to clear the air. Could he maybe talk about last night again? Danny asked softly, glancing up at Sebastian with a blush creeping across his cheeks. Sure, Sebastian replied, looking cautiously at him. He flipped onto his side so he was fully facing Danny. What do you want to know? Danny took a deep breath, feeling the knot in his chest loosen slightly. For the first time since everything had happened, it felt like they could start to figure things out together. Chapter 46. When Sebastian asked what else he wanted to know, Danny felt his mind spin with questions. There were so many that he had to pause for a moment to think about where to start. He ran his hands through his hair, trying to focus on the most important thing he needed to understand first. Since he couldn't remember most of the end of the night or how he had even ended up at Sebastian's house, that seemed like the obvious place to begin. What exactly led to me getting here? Danny asked, gesturing toward Sebastian's house. Sebastian thought for a moment before answering. Well, it was kind of a coincidence, I guess, he said slowly. You found me sitting by myself at the party and you were really drunk. You started blaming me for something I didn't even understand. I offered to give you a ride home because I didn't think it was safe for you to stay there in that condition. You accepted, and I drove you here. That was it. Nothing else had happened at that point. Danny let out a small breath. He felt relieved knowing he hadn't embarrassed himself in front of everyone at the party. But now he had another question pressing on his mind. What had actually happened between them after he got to Sebastian's house? So, what happened after I got here? Danny asked quietly, cheeks warming. He hated how unsure he felt, not remembering what he had done or said. Sebastian exhaled slowly. I told you to take a shower to freshen up. You smelled of smoke and alcohol, and, well, I needed you to be a bit more clear-headed. While you were gone, I changed into something comfortable. You came back sooner than I expected, and we ended up talking and getting close. I kissed you, and then we kind of fell asleep after a while. Danny blinked, his cheeks heating even more, but he felt some relief knowing that nothing had happened that would truly cross a line. He shifted uncomfortably, unsure what to ask next. Okay, are you gay? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper, his words fumbling. Sebastian raised an eyebrow, tilting his head. Yes, he said simply. I came out a while ago, publicly at school back in October. I thought everyone knew. Danny's eyes widened. He leaned back slightly, a small smile tugging at his lips. The tension in his chest eased just a bit, and a light flutter of excitement filled his stomach. But then doubt crept back in, twisting in his stomach again. So, where does that leave us? What are we? Danny asked, looking directly into Sebastian's eyes. He needed an answer, but he was terrified of what he might hear. Sebastian's expression softened, thoughtful and hesitant. I don't know, he admitted quietly. I'm not really used to relationships, especially anything that involves a lot of physical contact. I'm not great with that kind of closeness. Danny tilted his head, curious. Why not? Sebastian shifted, struggling for words. Some things happened in my past that made me careful about getting too close to people. It's not about you, I just have to take things slowly. He forced a small, reassuring smile, but Danny noticed the subtle strain behind it. Danny felt a pang of sadness at the hint of distance, but also hope. Even this small, cautious connection with Sebastian was more than he had ever imagined. He nodded slowly, deciding to trust the progress they had made so far. Chapter 47. Come on, boys, or you'll be late for school. Sebastian's mom called from the bottom of the stairs. She was already dressed in her work suit, ready to head to court to testify for a child abuse case her husband had been handling as a therapist. Danny, Philip, and Sebastian hurried down the stairs, school bags in tow. Sebastian gave his parents a quick smile before heading out to start the car. His dad nodded warmly at Danny and Philip, while his mom ruffled Philip's hair affectionately. Danny's stomach twisted with nerves at the thought of returning to school after the holidays, and after the New Year's party, but the reassurance Sebastian had given him yesterday eased his mind slightly. They dropped Philip off at his grade school first before heading to the high school. Danny's nerves worsened with every turn of the wheels, his stomach tight as knots formed in his chest. He glanced over at Sebastian, who noticed his tension and quietly placed a hand on Danny's knee, giving it a small, comforting squeeze. Danny looked at him with a mixture of relief and anxiety before letting out a deep breath and leaning back in his seat. When Sebastian pulled into the high school parking lot, he removed his hand from Danny's knee and returned it to the steering wheel. Danny's stomach sank further at the sight of the school and the busy students milling around. The lack of Sebastian's reassuring touch made him even more uneasy. He glanced around, shrinking slightly in his seat. Are you okay? Sebastian asked, glancing at Danny. I don't know if I can do this, Danny admitted, rubbing his face with his hands. Are you sure no one else saw anything? Yes, Sebastian replied firmly, keeping his gaze on Danny. The calm sincerity in Sebastian's eyes made Danny inhale slowly and gather himself. With a determined nod, he practically jumped out of the car, closing the door behind him with a decisive click. Sebastian followed, meeting him at the front of the car. He gently rested a hand on Danny's back for a reassuring moment before dropping it and walking toward the school, Danny keeping pace at his side. As they reached the sidewalk, Sebastian tensed slightly, and Danny immediately noticed. "What's wrong?" Danny asked, glancing up at him. Did you and Jenna ever make up?" Sebastian asked cautiously. "Kind of why?" "She's coming this way. Fast." "Wait, didn't she go with you to the party last night?" "Yep." Danny's stomach twisted. Jenna had seen parts of the evening, and he wasn't sure where she stood, or if she'd say anything. "Hey, Sebastian." Jenna called as she approached. "I'm so sorry I couldn't text you after the party. My phone fell in the pool, and I haven't gotten a new one yet. But I'm glad to see you're safe." Her gaze shifted to Danny, noticing how close he was to Sebastian, their nervous expressions clear. Jenna opened her mouth, seemingly ready to comment, but Sebastian quickly intervened. "So, how was your fantasy crush night last night?" Sebastian asked smoothly, locking eyes with her. "I'm sure the cheer captain had a memorable time too." Jenna's face turned bright red, and she fumbled with her hands, clearly flustered. She quickly turned and jogged toward the school, calling over her shoulder, "Sebastian, you jerk." Sebastian chuckled softly at her reaction. Danny, meanwhile, fidgeted nervously. His hands itched for something to calm his nerves, but he reminded himself he couldn't rely on old habits, not with Sebastian here. He opened his mouth to thank Sebastian for handling the situation, but the school bell rang before he could speak. Sebastian offered him a small smile and led the way into the building, Danny following closely behind, his worries settling slightly as he walked alongside him. Chapter 48. That first day back at school after the winter holidays was one of the hardest Danny had faced in a long time. By the time he climbed into Sebastian's car to leave, he felt a wave of relief wash over him. He stayed silent during the drive home, too drained and irritated to speak. After picking up Philip, who chatted nonstop about his day, they headed straight to Sebastian's house. Once inside, Sebastian suggested that Philip could do his homework in the study, a cozy little room lined with bookshelves. Excited, Philip dashed off without even saying goodbye to Danny. Sebastian gave Danny a shy, slightly mischievous smile. Danny was about to say something when Sebastian's phone pinged. Sebastian frowned, pulled it out, read the message, and quickly shoved it back into his pocket. Danny felt a spike of irritation. All day, Sebastian had been getting texts that pulled his attention away, and it was starting to wear on him. "Let's get started on homework," Sebastian muttered, dropping his backpack in the living room. Danny sighed, setting his own materials on the coffee table. He tried to focus, but his mind refused to settle. He needed a distraction. "Sebastian, I can't focus. Could we play something like 20 questions, just to help me calm down?" Danny asked, tapping his pencil against the table. "I'm too wound up to concentrate on homework right now." Sebastian looked up, concern in his eyes. He thought back to his own first day back after coming out, and he knew Danny was probably under a lot of stress too. This was harmless fun, and he wanted to help. "All right, but who starts?" Sebastian asked, closing his workbook. Danny visibly relaxed, exhaling as his shoulders dropped. "Since I suggested it, you can start," Danny said, leaning back against the couch. Sebastian thought for a moment. "Okay, let's start easy. What's your favorite color?" Yellow," Danny replied. "Not what I expected," Sebastian said with a light chuckle. "Oh yeah? And what were you expecting?" "I don't know, but it wasn't that." Danny grinned slightly. "All right, your turn. What's your favorite color?" "Probably purple," Sebastian replied, smiling. They continued with simple questions, easing into the game, until they reached question 10. Then Sebastian, curiosity getting the better of him, asked something more personal. "So, what actually happened with your brother? You never really explained," he asked. Danny hesitated, nervously fidgeting with his hands. But he knew he could trust Sebastian. Taking a deep breath, he spoke. My brother got involved with the wrong crowd, and he was trying to cut ties before leaving for college, Danny said, voice tight. He invited them over to hang out one last time, but they had other plans. I was just down the hall and didn't hear anything. My parents blamed me for bringing them in and wouldn't listen to anyone, even the police. Danny's eyes stung as the memories came rushing back. He flinched when Sebastian gently placed a hand on his leg, a quiet reassurance. Danny wanted more than just comfort, but he knew better than to push. Just then, Sebastian's phone pinged again. He sighed and checked it, his face tightening before tossing it to the far end of the couch. "Who's been texting you all day?" Danny asked, irritation creeping back in. "My ex-girlfriend," Sebastian admitted with a resigned look. "She's been messaging for weeks and seems frustrated that I haven't replied." Danny huffed, shaking his head. "Seriously? Fine. But that question doesn't count. I was just annoyed by the distraction." Trying to shift the focus, Danny asked, "What was the experience that made you stop going to parties?" Sebastian exhaled deeply. "There was a party, a friend I trusted, someone I had feelings for. Something happened, I lost track of time and ended up somewhere I didn't want to be. I only have vague memories of it, and, well, I was lucky to get out." Danny's curiosity was piqued, but he sensed Sebastian wasn't ready to share more. Still, he couldn't help himself. "Really? That's it? That's why you don't like parties?" "I don't believe you," Danny said, frustrated. He had opened up about his own past, and all he got in return was a vague answer. Sebastian gave a tight-lipped smile, but Danny had reached his limit. "Fine, don't tell me. I'll figure it out myself," he muttered, shoving his homework back into his backpack. Without waiting for Sebastian, he stormed upstairs, threw his bag into his room, and headed for the bathroom to take a long, cold shower, letting the water wash away the tension of the day. Chapter 49. It was the middle of the night when a strange sound pulled Danny from his sleep. He sat up in bed, rubbing his eyes and straining to listen. All he could hear were soft footsteps moving down the hallway, fading as they went. Danny stared at his bedroom door, puzzled. Who could be wandering the house at this hour? He got out of bed and hesitated at the door, hand hovering over the handle. After a moment, curiosity won out, and he quietly stepped into the hallway, careful not to wake anyone. Wearing only pajama pants, Danny realized following the footsteps might not be the wisest idea, but he couldn't resist. He crept down the stairs, doing his best to muffle the creaks of each step, and soon found himself on the main floor. Ahead, a shadow moved toward the backyard. Danny paused at the top of the last step, questioning if he really wanted to see who it was, but his feet carried him forward before he could change his mind. Peering through the sliding glass doors, Danny spotted a figure sitting on a patio chair. His breath caught. It was Sebastian. Dressed in a t-shirt and pajama pants, Sebastian sat hunched forward, elbows on his knees, hands pressed against his face. The chilly night air did not seem to bother him. Danny could barely make out the faintest glimmer of moisture on Sebastian's face in the moonlight. A wave of concern hit him. Why was Sebastian out here alone, clearly upset? Danny's own eyes began to sting. He knew he shouldn't intrude, but his heart ached at the sight of Sebastian sitting there in pain. Danny wanted to be someone Sebastian could trust, someone he could open up to. He understood that Sebastian had his reasons for keeping his past private, but Danny also knew that carrying this kind of hurt alone wasn't healthy. Danny hesitated at the door, unsure if he should approach. Just then, Sebastian shifted slightly, turning his head. Danny froze, holding his breath. But Sebastian didn't look outside or notice him. Seeing that, Danny slowly retreated back toward the stairs, careful not to draw attention. He decided he would have to wait until morning before trying to figure out what was troubling Sebastian. He quietly slipped back into his bedroom, tucked himself under the covers, and tried to sleep, but the image of Sebastian sitting alone on the patio, quietly upset, lingered in his mind, haunting his thoughts. Chapter 50. Philip jumped out of the car first, racing toward the front door of Sebastian's house, while Sebastian and Danny took their time gathering their school bags from the backseat. All day, Danny had been thinking about last night, trying to figure out how to earn Sebastian's trust when even brief contact seemed difficult for him. Then an idea struck. Maybe they could try small exercises, little steps to help Sebastian grow more comfortable with physical contact. Danny wasn't sure if Sebastian would agree, but it was the best plan he had. "Hey, Sebastian," Danny called as they walked around to the front of the car. "Yes," Sebastian replied, looking at him curiously. "What would you think about trying a kind of exercise, but for trust?" Sebastian raised an eyebrow. "Exercise?" "Yeah, like small contact exercises," Danny explained carefully. Sebastian hesitated. "Danny, I don't think that's a good idea. I've tried contact therapy before, and it felt invasive." Danny nodded. "Okay, but this time, it's on your terms. I won't touch you unless you give me permission. Ever." Sebastian considered that for a moment. Danny's terms were reasonable, and deep down, he knew he wanted to take the chance to challenge himself. "I suppose," he said finally. They went inside and up to Sebastian's room. Danny left the door open slightly so Sebastian knew he wasn't planning anything extreme. But Sebastian's hands shook as he stepped inside. He didn't want to hurt Danny, emotionally or otherwise, if he had to stop suddenly. Danny noticed his tension and stepped closer, standing directly in front of him. "It'll be okay, I promise," Danny said gently, offering his hand with a reassuring smile. Sebastian, trusting him, nodded and slowly took Danny's hand. Danny led him toward the bed, letting them sit down comfortably. Danny sat first, patting the space in front of him. Sebastian hesitated but eventually joined him, crossing his legs. "Okay, so, what do we do now?" Sebastian asked, fidgeting with his fingers. "Slowly," Danny replied, relaxing into the bed. He rolled up his sleeves, revealing the scars on his arms and upper chest. "You can touch them if you want," he added softly. Sebastian glanced down, his eyes wide, but Danny smiled at him encouragingly. Tentatively, Sebastian lifted a hand and traced one of the scars along Danny's arm, moving slowly and carefully. He continued to another, massaging gently. Danny caught Sebastian's wrist as he moved to another scar, sensing the rising tension in Sebastian. "It's okay," he whispered, holding Sebastian's wrist gently until he relaxed. With patience, Danny guided Sebastian's arm so that his palm faced upward. "Do you trust me?" Danny asked, keeping eye contact. He rested his hand lightly over Sebastian's wrist. He wanted to understand, to help, without pushing too far. Sebastian nodded, swallowing nervously. Danny moved Sebastian's sleeve slightly, revealing his wrist. He noticed the fresh scars and the lingering signs of old ones, and his heart tightened. He could feel Sebastian's pain radiating from him. Carefully, he held Sebastian's wrist, letting him see that he was safe. Tears welled up in Sebastian's eyes, and Danny quickly moved closer, gently wiping them away. "It's okay," Danny whispered. "I'm here." Sebastian blinked, clearing his throat. He couldn't finish, the words caught in his throat. Just then, Sebastian's phone pinged from the desk. He hesitated, then went to check it, his hand trembling slightly. Danny watched silently. The message appeared to be about a trial or article, but Sebastian quickly closed it and turned back to him, face pale. "Everything okay?" Danny asked gently. "Yeah," Sebastian said, forcing a small smile. "Just an old friend won't leave me alone even though, he trailed off. Danny nodded, accepting the half-truth. He knew Sebastian wasn't ready to share everything yet, and he didn't press. He made a mental note to look into it later when he had a quiet moment, respecting Sebastian's privacy for now. Thanks for listening to today's BL story. If it made your heart skip a beat, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Only here on BL Stories, where love knows no limits.